reason why I wanted to be on the Transit Riders Advisory Committee is because I wanted to be a voice of the riders. And this seemed like a wonderful opportunity, and I'm thrilled that PSTA has this. I was thrilled when I learned that they had this, and it's turned out to be everything I'd hoped it to be and more. So, yeah, okay, I can start with Richard, then move to Richard. Go
Okay,
ahead.
I'm Richard McDaniel. I represent South County, and I echo what Gloria said on you know, wanting to be a voice of the rider, and yeah.
I'm Sue Keating. I'm Mid-County. Not by my own choice. I started having to ride the bus, and I see some issues, and I found my way around, and I like to be a part of shaping it.
I'm David Schneider. I represent professionals, and I'm on the committee, I guess, for some of the same reasons, to have a voice in it, to see exactly how the operation works, and obviously we have issues as riders that would like to consider the voice as well.
Well, my name is Tim Parietti, representing South County. I moved to St. Petersburg last year, and since I've been there, I've just been really appreciating how available and accessible the public transportation is here compared to other places. I have family members who need it, who were unable to drive, and I just would like to be more involved in the process.
I'm Mark O'Hara. I live in St. Petersburg. I've been on the board for a while now, like October of 2016. And I came from New York, where we had subway and everything was a little different. And I just hoping to bring a little bit more of that to this area and share my insight.
My name's Camille Soleil. I'm the alt from South County, and I used to just walk and ride my bike, and then I moved out of downtown and started riding the trolley. And just want to make it as effective and efficient as it can be here.
I'm Deborah Bjorkquist, and I'm alternate North County, and I've been taking the bus and trains and everything else for 40 years, so I think I would have some good ideas.
My name is Renee Graham. I am an alternate student. I've been riding the buses for about 20 years, and I just want to put my opinion in it.
I'm Corey Krajisak. I'm the alternate business professional. Ever since I moved to St. Petersburg about 4 years ago, I've gone by foot or bicycle or public transportation. I'm one of those millennials who doesn't want to own a car because we can't afford it. So I kind of want to bring my insight to this unique board.
My name is Derek Shaver. I'm alt Mid-County. I wanted to get on the board just to provide some insight for the riders that I'm a part of, and just kind of seeing transit forward.
My name is Elizabeth, and I'm Mid-County, and this is the 3rd year, and I just love watching things happen. It is so cool. And I was just saying to the receptionist downstairs, because I was buying another pass, which I didn't know I could do, so I'm going to do that. And she said she'd like to stop by and see what we do. I said, it is so cool. From the bottom to the top, everybody's working on something, making it happen. And I love to watch it.
I'm Dave Kovar. I live in Safety Harbor. I'm North County, right?
Yes.
Anyway, from Safety Harbor. And before retirement, I was a consultant, so I traveled all over the country. I loved looking at transit systems and also about sprawl and the reliance on cars. I'm the TRAC representative on Forward Pinellas, what used to be called the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which does everything, the roads and the bike trails and all that stuff. So I'm really involved in both groups. Yeah, I use the buses because I know that I've got a medical problem that slowly is going to develop that I'm not going to be able to drive. So I want to be involved in it now. I dabble on the bus, but I know someday soon it'll be 100%.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Portia Smith. I represent Mid-County. This is my 2nd year, and I love being a part of PSTA on the TRAC Riders Committee because I'm able to get the voice of the rider and have my opinion shared, as well as different things that are going on within the bus systems that a lot of people who are above and don't exactly ride the bus don't get a chance to experience. So with that, I'm able to let them know what's going on and we can make positive changes.
Hi, my name is Kim Rankin. I represent Demand Response Transportation. DART is for people with disabilities that can't ride regular buses. Thank goodness PST offers DART. If I didn't, if there was a DART, I'd be just confined in my house all the time. Thank you very much.
Hope we would miss your humor.
Oh, yeah,
We'll miss,
great.
miss
Yeah,
your
you are
jokes.
Yeah, and you're so enthusiastic, that's right. Very good, thank you.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Borchers. I'm the Chief Development Officer here at PSTA. And my role at PSTA is to look at the planning for what we do. And so in my group, I have planning, I have scheduling, public engagement, and statistics. We have a number of staff members here today that we'll introduce to you later, but I'm so excited that you are all here. We have gotten so many good ideas from having this committee talk directly to our board and make our system better. And so thank you for your participation and all the things that you do.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comments. I don't have any cards for that, so. The next item is the chair's report, which is typically what I come and talk about what happened at the last board meeting, so you all, can have a feel for what the board is talking about and doing. And interestingly, to again reflect what Cassandra was just saying too, the board cares very much about what we say, what our input is. Many of them don't regularly ride, and they apologize for it, and they say, well, how, people will say, oh, how can board members not ride the buses? Well, the same complaints they have are the ones that we have. They're not convenient enough, they don't work if you have to go to a series of meetings and so forth. So they rely very heavily on what they hear from us. And so, and I've talked with a lot of them, and they've all said that too, that they've said, please give us your feedback. So, interestingly, the last board meeting, which was in December, they covered a lot of the things that we had approved here and sent to them as well. And those included things like the service changes that Cassandra had presented, the changes from the 444, the fare adjustment to the TD late shift program. They approved that as well. And an couple of interesting things. They also did elect their new chair and vice chair for the board. And Darden Rice was the chair for the last several years. Now it is Janet Long, and the vice chair is Joseph Barkley. So, but they've both been board members for a long time, and so it will be interesting to see. I don't imagine it'll be very different, but in fact, Janet Long is the representative to T. Barta, right, as well, which is again, we had talked a lot about regionalism as an initiative from our point of view, and she's very involved with that. She's very, very much a fan of T. Barta is the Tampa Bay Regional Transit Authority, right? And they have very little actual clout in terms of anything beyond planning, the planning stages, but they're very important, and they will probably become increasingly important. Am I correct in saying that? You know better than I how that sort of is evolving, but they, I think a lot of us want to see, PSTA continue to be PSTA and continue to be strong here in Pinellas County, and the people in Hillsborough feel the same way. But I think it's very important. We've all talked about having stronger and stronger interaction between the two, and complementary and interactive programs. So she's a good fan of that. Among the other things they also talked about, and again, I don't know the details the way you do, but there was an issue about tests for the autonomous buses.
Yes, so we, in our next meeting in January, we will be asking the board to approve some money to set aside to match some grants that we are in line for from some engineering firms in the autonomous vehicle space. And so we'll be looking at, are autonomous vehicles and the services that they provide feasible in certain parts of the county, and then can we do a demonstration project of an autonomous an issue coming up.
Yeah, great. Then the other thing they talked about, and this has obviously happened, they were talking, when he was talking about events that were coming up, they had happy hour where they were talking about what's the arrangement between PSTA and the transit app, but the transit app is one something they introduced at that board meeting, and a couple of us put it into our phones. Is that an official, they are our official transit app?
So we have equipment on our buses that shows real time, as you know, and you can either text from your stop to see when your next bus is coming, or you can look on our website. In order to make that even easier and to put it on an app, we have a marketing partnership with a company called The Transit App. So it's little green and with a white route on it, and you can download. It's very easy to use for trip planning, understanding the real time. So if you're not using it, I would encourage you to try it. If you have things that you see in it that are good, tell us. If you have things that you see that need to be improved, tell us that too. But the transit app should make it easier to know what bus is closest to you. You put your origin, your destination. It'll tell you exactly where to make your transfer and give you different options if you have multiple buses that you could take.
So take a look at, if you have a smartphone, go ahead and you may want to download that app. And then the last thing that they talked about was they had the Safe Place Media event there where they, I guess PSTA now is considered a safe place for kids at risk, where they can, if there's a problem, they can go to any bus driver. And again, I'm not maybe telling the tale correctly, but it is among, like schools are as well, but now the buses are too. So if a child's at risk, they can go on a bus and tell the driver.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think
I was followed as a kid one day, and I'm like, Mom, person's following me. I'm trying to call her and whisper. She's like, well, don't bring your tail home. That means you go to the police station and wait for me there.
Oh boy. So anyway, that was the information from the last board meeting. Next is the Forward Pinellas report.
That would be me.
So Dave, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what Forward Pinellas is and their role in planning?
Exactly. Forward Pinellas follows this same structure, that there's a group of elected officials that sit on a board just like this, that are made up of councilmen and mayors and the like. So each of our cities sends someone to the PSTA board, someone to the Forward Pinellas board. Again, it was the old Metropolitan Planning Org, but somewhere in there they wanted to jazz up its name to Forward Pinellas. Under that, just like our board, is the citizens. Here we call it TRAC, there they call it CAC, C-A-C, the Citizen Advisory Committee. What we do is the same thing. The elected board, they're dealing with the budgets and the planning and the like. They work with the county planners, who just bury these poor guys in data. I mean, reams and reams of data. It's not uncommon for them to get 100-page reports with priorities and dates and all this, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then they sift through it and give it to us, much like here. And we're really just a overview and oversight to make sure that there's no hanky-panky, that nobody routed it to his brother-in-law, or that it's following, again, what we're doing. We represent the people that, how come you're giving everything to North County or to South County, or how come you're so reliant on buses and overlooking handicap, or whatever it is, whatever the thing that we're supposed to do to represent the people that maybe the elected folks might be more interested in some constituency. The exact same thing is happening up there. However, what the MPO does, what Forward Pinellas does, is everything. Not only transit, roads, bike paths, parks, well, all of that, plus their regional piece is much more integrated. Although we have still that compartmentalizing by county, they have to deal with the other counties, with Hillsborough and Pasco. They're just doing that all the time. So very similar to this group, but with a much bigger agenda. And also a little bit of zoning things kind of come through them, big zoning things. Does that kind of cover it? What first off, let me apologize for missing last month's meeting. In the holidays, I guess we moved and I showed up on the wrong day. No one was here. So in the last couple meetings at the citizens group, we saw the same presentation you guys did with FDOT and the regional plan in which these 5 roads and all the justification, that's money coming from Florida. And again, the same thing, that idea of the one from USF through St. Pete being the primary one based on, and there's an example of just bearing you in data. How many people live where? What's the economic impact? What during the rush hour, not rush hour, and who lives where and where do they work and all that. And that's the kind of stuff we saw. It's still very sad that the Lexus lanes are getting, and we're in the same spot here. You could only vote on the whole package. You know, do you support it, yes or no? And everyone says, well, we support 90% of it. Do you say yes, but, or do you say no? And that we had the same problem there. We ended up supporting it with an addendum that we don't like the Lexus lane, you know, however many millions they're going to spend to run the extra lane down the Howard Franklin. I got to see a 200-page detailed document called the PIP, the planning PIP document. And what they do here, and most places don't, is Pinellas County talks to all of the cities and they roll up everybody's detailed 5-year plan of every parking space, bike lane, widening, curb, sidewalk, stop sign. You know, we're going to put a school crossing, whether it's Pinellas Park, Largo, Palm Harbor County. They pull all of that together in one document. So you don't, if you're a builder, you don't have to go to each entity. They don't have to do it. They do it just because it makes sense. So they said if you go to most counties in Florida, you have to go shop all around. So by the way, he holds this document out, and we all got copies of it, and it's just this huge spreadsheet. You start looking at every corner. Then each of those are rated by how much do they cost, when's it in, how many people are impacted, blah, 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 blah. They rated all them. What should we do first, second, third? And then they started saying, so we took project 72.4 and we moved it from year 3 to year 4, and we took this one from year 2 to year 1, and it was just astounding. I mean, I didn't even know how to vote on any of this. It just showed that they had done so much work. Like, good job was all I could say to them. Again, fascinating the amount of detail and planning. It would be easy to say, well, there's this thing by my house, how come you're not doing it for 3 years? I'd like it sooner. And I'm sure everybody in the county would say that. But in the end, you could just see they're working all over the place and on all kinds of things. Parks, plans, bike trails, again.
My understanding is that transit is an important piece of it.
I know, and it is not totally car-centric. I mean, that's mostly because all the 5-lane roads are built all the way, you know, so we're running out of places to make roads too big. The last thing we saw was incredible. I hate to be over, but it took my breath away. We had someone from St. Pete come, and you guys may have heard of Complete Streets. I hope St. Pete, it's going to roll out to everyone else, and not only here, but maybe to Miami and Jacksonville and Orlando. This is so forward-looking that they may, I mean, Kansas City and Chicago, I mean, I hope they roll this out. What has happened is they made a political initiative that any new idea, initiative, review, thought plan of any department has to be held up against this notion of complete streets. And complete streets are not cars. How many cars can you get down this street? It's who lives here, what's the economic impact, and that my favorite question is, should we take a lane out of this road so the cafe can put a table? Are there too many cars going down this street? And then so where should we pave? When we're going to pave a road, and again, it's the same, the amount of data these poor guys see is astounding. They're paving Martin Luther King from 28th Street to 34th Street, and while they're in there, they're going to apply complete streets, which is what are the economic impacts and from here to here. Anyway, it's incredible. If you are in St. Pete and you can get involved in that as a citizen, it's great. I wanted to just start attending some of their stuff to see if we could populate it everywhere. It's like Johnny Appleseed. And that was amazing. That's the 3 things we saw in the 2 months.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Yep.
That is wonderful that we are now part of Forward Pinellas as well,
Yeah.
where, you know, that we do have a representative on their Citizens Action Committee, specifically about transit.
So just so
Yes.
you all know, the Metropolitan Planning Organization is something that every region has, and they prioritize projects mostly for federal dollars.
Yes.
They also, here locally, Forward Pinellas plays the role of a Metropolitan Planning Organization, but also plays the role of the Pinellas Planning Council, which is why they also have land use responsibilities. And so having the voice of transit riders on the organization that looks at all modes of transportation is critical to making sure that the PSTA projects get into their program and that they get funded.
And although I'm an official, I hold the PSATA chair on there. John sits on the board as just I mean, he's here as a citizen.
We have two
A
members.
couple of us are there as just a citizen. So it's kind of neat. We've got several voices of people that
And you
are.
actually, you can watch for openings on the CAC, although this group does select somebody, Dave in
Yeah.
this case, to represent this group. You can also apply independently and get on that
So that's kinda
Citizens
cool.
Advisory Committee if you like.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
Thank you, Cassandra. That,
The next item on the agenda is our one action item, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from November 14th. Have all of you, particularly those of you who were attending the meeting, had a chance to review the minutes from that meeting, and are there any changes, additions, corrections? If not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor of approving?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Richard second. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next information item then is the orientation overview and staff introduction.
I want to keep this quick because I think you have some other very important conversations to have. I'd like to hear more from you all than talk. But you should have all received an orientation book that gives you some basic outline of PSTA facts and figures, some contact information, if you need to reach a staff person. Some of them are here today. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. Over the course of a year or two, however long that you will help us with this committee, you'll hear from a number of staff members. Normally, we bring to this committee action items that are going to the board. And so when we present that action item to the board, we tell them what this committee discussion was and what this committee's recommendation was. And so most of what we put on the agenda are things that you will make a recommendation to the board. So Nikki, who's going to present next, is also going to talk about your responsibilities in being a recommending body to a board such as ours. But I'll let her get into that. In your book, you have information about the service. You have our latest operating budget, our capital budget. Again, we'll go over projects in this, but we won't necessarily go over in this setting those actual documents. You also have in here, it's called the 10-year plan. It's our transit development plan, and this is a guiding document for us here at the agency in terms of projects and the service that we put out. So every 5 years, we do a major update of the transit development plan, and this is what tells organizations who help fund us, like FDOT, what our priorities are and what we will apply for grants for. And then in the years other than that major update, we create a progress report. So we say, how have we made progress on the initiatives that we said that we were going to do and the projects that we said we were going to implement. So you could read through that at your leisure. If you have any questions about that, you can certainly ask me before or after any one of the TRAC meetings. You also have the board members' information, contact information. Nikki's going to go over sunshine law and when and where things can be discussed on this committee. but understand that at any time, you as a member of this committee, or just as anyone in Pinellas County, can go talk to a member of our board as an individual. You also have contacts for each other, as well as some staff contacts, which you'll get to know the staff and understand that you can ask us pretty much anything about PSTA. You know, one of the great benefits about being on this committee is you now have more than just the website to make contact with. If you have a very specific question, we'd love to take your comments, and if you have something that you really want to get into a project or something initiative that you have personally that is not, we don't have time for here at the committee, you're always welcome to come and sit with staff and talk about the ideas that you have. You also have in there like all of the staff members and the organization chart, so if you have something specific, you can ask about that. Nikki is going to go over some highlights of the bylaws, but I would encourage you to read over those, especially your responsibilities as a TRAC member. And again, if there's anything that you have questions about, please feel free to contact me or Mary Ann, who's our TRAC coordinator. You would have gotten an email from her already. She's usually your first point of contact and can get you to the right person or get you the answer that you're looking for. So again, I thank you so much for your service to us and to the community. We hope that you will find as much value in the conversation as we do listening to it.
Did you want to introduce anyone else?
Yes, I do want to go around the room and have staff introduce themselves. So why don't you start, Clarissa?
Hi, I'm Clarissa Affeld. I'm an administrative assistant in the executive department, and I'm Mary Ann's right-hand person. So if she's not available, feel free to come to me, please.
As Cassandra said, I'm Mary Ann Sobosinski. I am coordinator of all things TRAC, and I'm also the administrative assistant for the planning department.
I'm Michael Hansen. I'm the director of finance. I'm responsible for accounting and budget, financial reporting, and treasury management.
Hi, I'm Debbie Leas. I'm the chief financial officer. I'm responsible for Michael.
Everything green.
I count the beans here. I'll pass it over this way.
Hi, I'm Ross Silvers. I'm the mobility manager here at PSTA. As such, I'm the manager over the DART service you heard mentioned before, and also over our transportation disadvantage program, providing a variety of transportation services to people who are low income, have disabilities, and are seniors. Thank you for your service.
Good afternoon. My name is Henry Lukasik. I'm the director of maintenance. I oversee fleet operations, namely buses, and also facility and infrastructure, which is buildings, passenger terminals, bus stops. And if there's ever any questions, if anybody needs anything, please feel free to reach out to me.
I'm Theo Beckelman-Hollis. I'm with Safety, Security, and Training.
I'm Nikki Nate, who Cassandra referred to a few times in her presentation. I'm actually with the General Counsel's office, which is outsourced to my law firm, Bryant Miller Olive. So I'm an attorney, Bryant Miller Olive, and I work with Alan Zimmett, who is the General Counsel to PSTA, to advise PSTA on all legal issues. So just run the gauntlet. But today, as Cassandra talked about, we are going to go over some things specific to this committee that we think will help you all understand the legal parameters and framework that you all will operate in.
So normally my seat is occupied by our CEO, Brad Miller, but he is in Tallahassee right now, trying to get us funding for our integrated app so that we can take transit app and put it on, make sure that it's accessible by everyone, but also has all of our services on it, including the Jolly Trolley, as well as look at the next step of the integration of that app, adding in other modes. Right now, if you went on transit app, you'd see, and you're in St. Petersburg, you'd see Coast Bike Share on there. You'd see, and you'd see Uber, and we want to add more modes onto that. We also want to add fare payment integration, so that when you go on, you want to plan your trip, you hit your trip, and then you can pay your fare all at once. We'll talk about a number of the technology improvements that we're going to do, but that is what he's up talking to folks in Tallahassee about, to see if we can get some funding to make all of those great things happen. So he sends his regrets, but he should be here next month for your photo.
And so the next item then on the agenda is for Nikki to speak with us about all things legal.
All things. 10 minutes or less. I'm just gonna kind of come up here because I feel like it's easier to see you all and then everyone's not staring at the back of the room. So, and I have my timer going so that I don't have to talk for too long. So I already introduced myself, but if you all have questions about anything that I say today, I'm gonna try to leave some time at the end so you guys can ask questions, and then you always have PSTA staff as a resource. So you all should have been given a few documents as part of your orientation today. Does everybody have those? The most important two that I think you would want to reference are the bylaws for this committee, and then there's a handy little summary of the Sunshine Law that we'll go over, and the two really work hand in hand. Your bylaws, for those of you who have ever served on maybe a board of directors or have been a part of organizations or groups in the past, the bylaws are like your roadmap. They're your governing document, they're like your constitution. They are adopted by the PSTA Board of Directors, and they essentially give this committee its direction on what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, how the membership is composed, and what the requirements are to be on this committee. So as Cassandra mentioned, I do recommend you read those over. They're not very long. We'll go over some of the highlights today, but I'm not going to stand up here and read bylaws to you because that would be very, very boring. A couple of things that you will want to pay attention to, as Cassandra mentioned, there is an attendance requirement for you to be on the committee. So if you cannot commit to making at least 80% of the meetings that are held, you may want to let or consult with PSTA staff about your appointment, because that is part of your constitution. So if you're not able to meet that attendance requirement, it will be an issue with you continuing on the committee. In conjunction with that attendance requirement, before your meetings, you'll get an email with what's called a quorum notice. So do you guys know what the word quorum means? Basically means the minimum number of you that has to be in this room in order for you all to do what you've been brought here to do, and that's make a recommendation to the PSTA board. So if there's not enough people here, business can't go on. So PSTA staff will send out an email quorum notice, and within 1 day of receiving that notice, you need to let PSTA staff know whether or not you're going to be able to be here. That's how they do their planning, so that they know we're committed, we're going to have a quorum, we can conduct business, or we need to find a new day. So that's part of your bylaws. That's not just PSTA staff nagging you all to see if you're able to come. It's in your constitution. So in conjunction with that, there's a few other things about your meetings. You'll notice your meetings are run by a chair. That's essentially just like the head honcho of the meeting. They keep order of the meeting, and they preside over all of your business. You'll also notice in your bylaws that your meetings are governed by what's called Robert's Rules of Orders. That's something that the chair uses to essentially just provide order for your meetings. So what order you're going to take business, how you take motions, and things like that. We've provided a little summary on Robert's Rules as well, but for the most part, your chair will walk you through a lot of Robert's Rules as she follows the agenda. You also have vice chairs and contingencies for absences and all that details in your bylaws. But that's the structure that you operate under. And then along with that, as Cassandra mentioned, because you make a recommendation to the PSTA Board of Directors, which PSTA is an independent special district of the state of Florida, meaning they are a governmental entity, they are required to conduct all of their business under what's called Florida's Sunshine Laws. And because you all are a committee that makes an official formal recommendation to the Board of Directors, all of you are also subject to the Sunshine Law for the work that you do on this committee. So what does that mean? That means two things. Sunshine Law has a public meetings component and a public records component. For your public meetings component, that means 2 or more members of this same committee cannot discuss business of this committee outside of the parameters of your official public meetings. So you all will have each other's contact information. If you become friends of the committee, you can certainly invite each other to your birthday parties, social events, things like that. Don't talk about PSTA business, because the Sunshine Law says that anytime you all meet to discuss official business of this board, you will do so in a meeting space that meets the requirements of the Sunshine Law. And the 3 requirements are that the public must be allowed to attend, which we don't have any public here today, but they certainly could be. Public notice has to be given of your meetings, and under your bylaws, that's at least 7 days before for regular meetings, or at least 3 days before for emergency meetings, and minutes must be taken. So PSTA staff here is here taking minutes of your meetings. The issue happens is if you talk to somebody in a social setting or outside of that public meetings format, you may have just violated the Sunshine Law because notice hasn't been given of that. Certainly PSTA staff isn't at your birthday party taking minutes. The public's not been invited to be there and they haven't been given notice to be there. So that's where both the definition of what constitutes a meeting, anytime you two talk to one another about official business, and the public meeting requirements come into play. So if that is an issue for anyone, let PSTA staff know, because it's absolutely important. Violations of the Sunshine Law, even unknowing ones, can mean essentially that the action that you've just taken is is just void. It's like it never happened, and that funnels all the way up to the PSTA board decision. Knowing violations can mean criminal fines up to $1,000. So we want to be sure that you all are comfortable with knowing just essentially only discuss PSTA business with your fellow committee members in this room. The public records component means every document, every letter, every email, every piece of information made or received in connection with official PSTA business is a public record, meaning any member of the public can come, make a public records request, and those documents have to be provided to them for inspection and copying. So what does that mean mostly for you? Most of your public records that you'll come in contact with will be your agenda or other things that PSTA staff gives you to prepare for the meeting. PSTA is already going to have most of those records and is not going to need them from you. The notes that you take at the meeting, to the extent that they are just to jog your own personal memory, you're not writing a note to Cassandra or writing or formalizing any type of communication. Your notes that are just your personal notes will remain your personal notes. Those are not public record. But your emails, if you maybe receive emails from other people in your community and they say, I hear you're on TRAC. TRAC really needs to make sure they do this, and that's received in your personal email, you may want to consider forwarding that along to Cassandra or PSTA staff, because that could possibly be a public record that, if a records request were made, would need to be produced and provided to the requester. There's a little summary, complete with little bullet point do's and don'ts in your backup materials that goes over everything that I just described, even in a little bit more detail. So I hope that will be a helpful guide to you. I generally say if you're asking yourself if something may violate the Sunshine Law, it probably does. That's probably your gut telling you something about that lawyer standing up in the front of the room talking to me made me scared enough to think that this might be a Sunshine Law issue. If you're feeling that way, even just reach out to PSTA staff, ask the question. There's certainly no problem with being able to get more clarification on what your responsibilities are. But even though, unlike the PSTA board, you're not elected public officials for purposes of the Sunshine Law and public records, the law does consider what you all do to be subject to those same rules and qualifications. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Yes.
So if you go to somebody's birthday and you walk in late and you say, I'm so sorry I'm late because my bus was late, that is okay. If you say the Route 78 was late because of X, Y, and Z, and we should really talk about that. That is not open. So that's where you get into sunshine law is anything that you might discuss here is off limits except for here in this room when we publicly notice the meeting.
Is that true of things that may happen in the future? Because it may be not something we've talked about, but, and I remember hearing something that said, well, you know, if it ever comes up, oh my God, you know, all kinds of things relative to we are transit riders.
Well, I think it's maybe, you know, it's that next step. I went to, you know, you went to Estonia, right? They had this really cool transit system. You can absolutely talk about that. We should do that here. That stays here.
Right.
Right? I mean, like, it's the information versus the discussion.
There's sometimes a fine line between the legal standard is anything that may foreseeably come before you for a vote. That's very broad. It's very broad on purpose because the sunshine laws came out of our 1968 constitutional revisions that were just to deal with the pork chop gang and a ton of fraud going on in Tallahassee. So it's designed to be very broad. So like Cassandra said, there is probably a fine line between just saying, oh, my bus was late, and saying, my bus was late, and here's what we should do about it on track, because some of those things will probably come before you. So just kind of keep that mental check. Certainly the agenda, if you already have an agenda out, you are going to know the matters that are about to come before you for recommendation. Those would all automatically be off limits. Courts do look to see what was your upcoming agenda, what agendas have you had in the past. And so is this a type of matter that's come before you in the past? It's probably going to come before you again. But in general, looking at the purpose of your committee to provide recommendations to the board about ridership issues, you really want to stay away from any discussion about ridership issues outside of this room or outside of the publicly noticed meeting. And if you have a question, like you have a really, really specific question that you're just burning to talk to about one of the other committee members, call PSTA staff first and say, I'm thinking about calling up so-and-so and saying this. Is this a matter that we're going to be voting on? Because sometimes PSTA staff is working on getting you all information and they know what's about to come before you. So just be mindful of that. As you all were getting your questions together, I remember two other quick points that I wanted to say. When you are here and you're presented for an item to make a recommendation on, you must vote unless you have a legally recognized conflict of interest. Conflict of interest means you're going to either make or lose money based on the vote. Probably not likely that most of the things that you're going to make a recommendation on will have that effect, but if that comes up and you have a concern, again, bring it up to PSTA staff, because if not, you can't just sit back in your chair and say, nope, this one's too controversial. I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. I don't want to vote on it. You have to vote. That's in both the sunshine law and in your bylaws, that you will vote on matters that come before you. That's why they pay you the big bucks.
Which is another issue.
The other thing, if you do have members of the public that come, you heard a reference at the beginning of the meeting to comment cards. Members of the public are entitled to speak to you before you make your votes. That's another component of the sunshine law that's followed in this room, that PSTA staff and your chair are mindful of. So you may have comment cards, you may receive comment from the public. That's all part of the public process. And in fact, you have to receive that input before you take an official vote. Are there any other questions?
I've got one more.
Go ahead.
Because people have said to me, you know, Gloria, there's an issue that I think that, you know, maybe something that could be discussed at the TRAC or something like that. Are they allowed to say that to me? And then what I almost always say is call Mary Ann and tell her that is an issue. I mean, they're allowed to say to me, this is an issue that I think may be of interest to TRAC, and then for me to say, call Mary Ann.
As long as you don't discuss it.
Right.
Give my
right.
point of view
I
on
think
if
it's from, I'm not sure what the preferred method of communication is, but I would even rather those questions go directly to PSTA staff, Mary Ann. And that way there's no there's nothing for there to be, because the chair is a member of the committee as well. So those types of questions should go directly to PSTA staff. And that's in your, if you're like, I don't remember who she told me to contact, those little bullet points I mentioned, I think it says, any questions, contact PSTA staff. So that would be Mary Ann in your case, and you all will have her contact info. Yes?
Well, I will say that part of the job that I view us is as being ambassadors and enthusiasm. So when someone talks to me at all about transit, I always tell them how great it is. And if we've seen any presentations here that are public, to tell them that they're out there, that we've seen some presentation on this or that. And almost always it's on the website is what's nice. That we know so much more about this stuff than anyone else. So anytime someone talks to me, I always feel free about that. Talking member to member is where the sunshine law gets.
Absolutely. Certainly talk to your members.
Your neighbors and the people at the birthday party.
Just don't, to contact, you can certainly communicate with members of your community. It's 2 or more members of the same committee. So that is also in line with what Cassandra was saying before. Sometimes you may have conversations with members of the board of directors because they want to know what you think personally, one-on-one. You are not a member of the same board, so no sunshine law concern.
Oh, okay, so
it's members of the same committee. So everyone in this room that's on the committee, that would be who is covered by it. But another part of your question raised a good point. It's all forms of communication, not just in person at the birthday party, not just over the phone, Facebook, Twitter, all of it. That is communicating with other individuals. So don't use Facebook to start communicating between the two of you, between 2 or more members of this committee about a matter that might come before you for a vote.
But liking something is not communicating. Liking something, right? I mean,
right, like if PSTA puts out, we're going to do this great plan, and members of the committee like it. Liking something's not communicating. Starting to comment on it, though, is. So just be mindful of what you're commenting on, who's commented on it before you. If another member has commented on that same thread before you, now this is, that's why I jokingly said this is why they pay you the big bucks, but you need to be aware of how you're communicating with the other members of the committee and how that looks to the outside world, because you might not have been intending to comment back on what another committee member said, but now you're commenting in the same thread. So just be mindful that it's all methods of communication, including those Facebook, email, blogs, all those types of things you can comment on the internet, and just make sure that you're not communicating with other members of your committee.
It's not as hard as it sounds.
It's not. It's not. It's but it is real, and it's not based on how well you know about it. If any of you read the paper and some of the hot water of Pinellas County and their advisory committees have run themselves into, it was not a matter of how well they knew it or understood it. It just is what it is. And so that's why we're here to make sure you know it, you understand it. And if you have any questions, you have resources that you can reach out to before you post or before you have that conversation. Yes, Richard.
Thanks for giving this presentation. I thought earlier you said that if somebody from the public contacted us and said, I heard you were on TRAC and vote this way on a certain, that we should forward that email. Did I mishear that?
No, that's correct. You could forward that email to PSTA staff, and that's because go ahead.
And so I'm just wondering if this is about 2 or more members communicating from the TRAC committee, why, if somebody from the public contacted us, like, for example, the gentleman that spoke came in public comment last week, or in November. I see him on the bus. Mm-hmm. So if he contacted me and said something about, what he discussed here, I should forward that email on, even though he's not a member of this committee? 2
components. Remember, there's the public meetings component. That says you all can't talk to one another. So talking to that gentleman who's not a member of the committee and he comes up to you on the bus and says, hey, I think the work you're doing is great. By the way, I think you should do this, this, and this. That is not going to be a meeting concern because he's not a member of this committee. Now, if he sends you an email, then the second part of the Sunshine Law may come into play, which is public records. And that's that any document, any communication, any email made or received in connection with official business of PSTA, including your capacity as a TRAC member, becomes a public record. And so what I suggested was, instead of keeping that email in your own personal email account or whatever it is that you use to communicate via email, right when you receive it, forward it over to Mary Ann, and then she will preserve it, because with every public record has to be preserved for a period of time. And then if PSTA receives a public records request for all emails made and received by TRAC members, she already has them and can just forward them along. But what the difference is, his email to you, while it doesn't violate the meeting portion, may constitute a public record. And so the public record part would still, is under the umbrella of Sunshine. Does that make sense? So
I
there's
understand what you're
meetings
saying.
and there's records. And if you receive emails that are about official business on PSTA and they're not from someone at PSTA, then perhaps consider forwarding them into a PSTA staff member so that they can keep them for retention and production if necessary.
Okay.
And don't text. I mean, you can text, but don't text about your work here on TRAC, because that is an absolute nightmare to preserve and produce. And that's what's required for every public record.
So anything you send to staff is a public record.
Sure.
But that's already going to be preserved by the fact that you're sending it to staff.
Just so you know.
Your agendas, all that stuff, you don't have to keep at home waiting for it. PSTA will have those, but that's why I gave the example about the email, because that's the most frequently time that you would be the only person in possession of that public record. And so a way to alleviate you from having to be the one responsible for it is just to forward it in, then it will be preserved by PSTA and capable of being produced if a public records request is received that would cover those. Make sense? Nope.
How
Okay.
do we safely respond?
Well, if it's to someone that's not on the committee, you can respond in any way that you want. But
As long as we don't give up anything that's within the agenda.
no, you can talk about things that are on the agenda. Not to your other committee members. To other people outside, that's fine. But just be mindful that if you're talking about official PSTA business, that's a public record, and you might want to forward it in unless you want to be responsible for preserving it yourself.
So somebody sends you an email, says, I have this great idea, the TRAC should do this, and they should do that, and they have these, like, list of 17 things that you should put on your agenda. My suggestion to you is that you go ahead and you respond. You say, thank you so much, certainly, bring these to the committee, and just CC Mary Ann, and you're done.
Yeah.
Great
That's a
idea,
great
thanks.
example. I just want you guys to be aware, because it doesn't matter where an email's stored. It doesn't matter if it's sent to your personal email address. What matters is the content. And if it's about your work here on TRAC, it's probably a public record. And so the easiest way to preserve that is just to forward it or CC in the reply right away.
Thank you so much.
Did you have one more, Richard?
No,
Was that the answer?
y'all covered it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Before we move forward, we have another member of PSTA staff who has joined the meeting, James.
Hello.
Would you introduce yourself to the?
Oh, you did?
exhibit?
Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. James Bradford, I'm Chief Operating Officer. Welcome. I see some new familiar faces, so welcome back. I also see some newer faces, so welcome to the first time. One of our operators used to say, the first time you come, you're a guest, and the next time you come, you're family. So welcome to the PSTA family. I sit over on the operations side, so I think you've already probably got a little bit of snapshot. We have all the bus operators on that side, the transportation supervisors, maintenance, we got safety, security, and training, customer service. We have our DART, air transit, on-demand response, made up of probably 370 or so operators, another 30 supervisors, and then of course maintenance and other support staff. So we do have 2 union shops over there, 2 bargaining units, and pretty much all the coming and going and daily operations. So I heard someone talking about reaching out to staff earlier, and you'll find that a lot of us are easy to reach. Our first initial last name at psta.net. For me, that's J. Bradford at psta.net. So If you ever need to reach out or have a concern you think I may be able to help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll do what I can to help you resolve whatever matter is at hand. So good to meet you. Back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, James. The next item on our agenda is the discussion about our TRAC initiatives. And last year, what happened was, and I know you can actually phrase it better than I can, Cassandra, but the role of us as TRAC members is to review information that is presented to our board, internal information, and also to communicate with PSTA about questions we have, asking for clarification of issues, and for them to ask us the writer's perspective. But then last year, what a lot of us had were some questions on issues that affected not just PSTA, but the municipalities in which PSTA functions and other agencies. And so we had gone to them with these questions, and what it was recommended is that we develop these initiatives that we did, that we gave to, were circulated in letters to FDOT, and you know, I'm not covering it probably very accurately, and I apologize if it sounds kind of what you're talking about. But we had we developed 3 initiatives, and for each of the initiatives, one was regarding safety, and in other words, we were saying it was the issue of safety is not just safety on the buses, but we as riders are pedestrians getting to the bus and from the bus stop to our homes, from the bus stop to the stores that we're visiting, and that safety is a much broader issue than just having safe buses on the roads. And we presented our letter with our initiatives to our board, and then we presented it to the other agencies and communities involved. And then the second was on regionalism, because again, there's a lot of talk about regional transit, but we wanted to have them have the perspectives of the riders to say, you know, this is what we're having regional transit means to us, having regional paratransit means to us. And so we developed those last year. It was very well received, and we wanted to address those issues, new issues this year, or dig deeper on the old issues from this committee. Did I cover it pretty well? I think you did a good job. Okay, thanks. You know, and the first issue on the initiatives is the whole process, how we develop that and how that all flows together. Then the timeline of how we'd like to address those initiatives this year, and then actually just have some broad scale thinking about the initiatives that we will take up at the next meeting. Okay. You know, and again, in just general terms, we talked about the process, but basically, we had a meeting where we brainstormed. What are the things that we want to say? What do we want our board and people beyond our board to hear that the writers think? What are the thoughts that we have? And then we came back and we said, okay, there were 3 that we chose for this past year, and we then had subcommittees, or you know, committees that got together and actually put together the wording. We brought it to the committee. The committee, you know, looked at it, tweaked it if necessary, and then we finalized it and took it to the board. And so, did we give them a copy of the initial timeline that we have for this? And we wanted to give it plenty of time. Last year, with the 2, you know, we worked very fast and very hard to get 2 of them done. The third one of the key members of the committee who really was speaking about it, left the committee, had to leave the committee for personal reasons. And so she not being here and the time getting tight, we didn't do the 3rd initiative last year. We may bring that one up again or not, but we wanted to have plenty of time on our timeline so that we could look at whatever initiatives, whatever we come up with at the February meeting.
So this is the space where you give us direction about what you want to talk about. A lot of the things that will put on the agenda will be things that are going to the board, but we know we also have this open space for you to tell us what are the issues out in the system. If they are things that we can solve as staff, we will do that. If they are information items that you want to put on the board, on the agenda for this committee, we can do that. But if they are something that is broader than PSTA, that is when they become a TRAC initiative. So the idea of regionalism came about because there were several members last year who wanted to know more about, I'm hearing this out in the world, I'm seeing this in the newspaper, I want to know more about what's happening, and I think the committee should put their stamp on it. And you'll see that letter in front of you, that final letter of what that looked like for regionalism. Also for safety, Gloria and Elizabeth were bringing issues to PSTA staff members, and we said, look, guys, we totally agree with you that these are issues facing the riders, but they are outside of our jurisdiction. So let's talk about what the issues are and then make a case to our partner agencies to say, you all need to fix this, whether that's the county or cities or FDOT. And we sent that letter, and you also have that letter as well, the one addressed to the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. And then through this process, we help you make a list of who that letter goes to. So you've got an issue, we figure out if we can't solve it, who can solve it, and who should we let know that you've got a problem and potential solution. So I think for today, we know that some of you may think of things later, but we thought let's just have an open conversation about what might be some issues that you're facing. If they are internal, we'll help you with them. If they are external, we'll put them on the list for initiatives. And then over the next few weeks, if you have other ideas, if you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, on Thursday and say, oh, I should have said this, email it. Email it to Marianne, and she will put it on the list. So in February, what we'll do is we'll compile all of the ideas, and then you all will discuss and choose 3 initiatives to move forward with. If you look at the schedule that we have, the work session is not this committee. The work session is a subset of this committee. So you can choose to be on one of the working groups. Those will also be publicly noticed meetings, but they will be a meeting independent of the committee of the whole. And that will be when we'll take a deep dive into the information that you're asking for and help formulate your ideas of what you want the letter to be. Staff then drafts a letter or a short position paper, and then you could all review it and edit it. So with that, I'll let Gloria sort of facilitate your brainstorm.
And just again, once more to reiterate, the neat thing with this initiatives system, that this is, last year was the first year that we did these specific types of initiatives. It was so that we would not feel that we were just being like rubber stampers of things as well. And we wanted, there were things that we know as riders that non-riders don't necessarily know. And that's that whole safety issue became a big thing where I know last year Brad, the CEO, was riding the bus in June. The whole month he rode the bus, and he said, all those things you were saying on the safety issue, I saw it. I saw it when I was riding it. But the people on the board and in even within Forward Pinellas don't necessarily realize that these are issues we face as transit riders.
So I do want to get to the discussion, but for the safety initiative, I want to tell all the TRAC members that were here last year how successful that was, and tell those that are new to say this is really important. Is Gloria had a moment where she saw her work in action, didn't you?
It was hopefully it was my work
in
action.
I found Heather Bonnie's been talking to them, so go ahead.
Oh,
tell
really?
Tell your story. Yes.
Oh, that's fabulous. I happen to have gone by where a shopping center is being redone, Woodland Square up in Oldsmar. And I kept thinking, I wish that they had a way to access from the sidewalk into that shopping center, because you couldn't before. And as we drove by, I realized they'd put in the little concrete walkway that is exactly what I keep asking for, so that we don't have to go in car lanes. And And so I actually looked who's the developer for that property. I contacted them. I talked to the property manager for that shopping center. I said, how did that come about? And he said, well, the city of Oldsmar asked us to do it. And he said, first of all, he was thrilled that somebody noticed, and it was great because I noticed it within days of them having completed it. So it's obviously somebody's watching. And I said, now I can take the bus there and I can shop in the stores there. I could not have come there otherwise. But he said the city of Oldsmar was the ones that asked for it. And it was really just an issue of somebody asking for something that makes it safer for those of us who are not arriving by car. And so that's pretty exciting.
So Bonnie's been
That
working with the city of Oldsmar, and that's how that happened. So our, in
Oh
our
my
planning
God,
department.
that's especially cool. So I guess it
So
comes
your work
full
in
circle.
action.
Yeah,
There you
it,
go.
it really is coming through.
So what do you guys want to solve?
Yeah. What's our next
Let's go.
issue? Yes, go ahead, Lisa.
Well, I fixed the 66th Street where all the dirt was falling out from the bus stop, and I had to call the city, and they know now because of what you've done. And sure enough, they were putting up little borders at the bus stop so the gravel wouldn't spill out onto the sidewalk. And I had to teach the bus drivers, no, you don't have to go to the driveway. You can drop me off right here. And I found another one, and I sent an email to Patricia Wilson at Pinellas Park. Haven't heard back from her, but 2 workmen were fixing my ramp where there was a water break, and they fixed it, and they were the concrete guys, and I said, oh, while you're here, let me tell you about another spot, and I'll follow up again with Patricia. But that's the kind of thing that now I have the wherewithal to approach my city and say, here's another little glitch we need to pay attention, because I can't reach the signal because there's a gaping hole between the pole and the sidewalk. And so the guys understood it perfectly, but they're not the bosses, so I don't know. But I will follow up because those letters that got written.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so let's talk about some of the initiatives. It was the safety and then the regionalism were the two. One of the things we could do is we could drill down deeper on those issues if we want to in the coming year. One of the other ones was art in transit was the one that did not get put together, and that being that, you know, having attractive bus stops make it more likely that people will want to have bus stops there. It presents a nicer image of transit and transit ridership. You know, that being another initiative where we could theoretically say that here's the riders, we are very supportive of things that make, you know, art in transit that makes transit more attractive. Thoughts that, you know, I had is the whole issue of the image of riders. You know, I think a lot of us have heard stories like, oh, you ride buses? You know, what kind of people do you ride the buses with? I mean, you know, and I mean, right, but I mean, maybe those are the kinds of things we want to talk about. I don't want to just implant the only ideas that come up here, but those are the thoughts that, you know, were coming to us, I think, as we've created our initiatives. Does anyone have any other thoughts right now?
Well, I do.
Yes.
I wish I could ride regular buses, but I can't because I'm in a manual wheelchair. I know you guys can ride regular buses because you have an electric wheelchair. Well, my car ride driver told me that a lot of people in manual wheelchairs can't ride regular buses because it's hard for them to get up that ramp.
Yeah, the ramp can be very steep depending
Now,
on the...
who should I talk to about it, Ross? Because I mean, some people can't afford to take care of it, but they also can't ride regular buses because they can't get up the ramp in the bus because of their wheelchair being manual. Who should I talk to about it, Cassandra?
I got it for you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to Henry and to Ross and maybe do a little bit of we could do some national best practices research.
Yes, I mean, I know about it because when I was doing the video and photo shoot, it was hard for me to get on a regular bus, you know?
Okay. Yeah, okay.
That's internal, correct?
Sounds like
That's an internal
Oh, yeah,
fix?
it could
That
be.
sounds like
Yeah.
internal. Well, I mean,
And that's okay. I mean,
yeah,
just-
it could be an
just keep-
external as well at some point when relative
Tell
to
us,
care.
tell us something that you want to achieve or that you noticed or something.
Well, I know that there are issues with how many bicycles people can put on a bus, and that people have to wait sometimes 2 and 3 buses to get on the bus with their
Same
bikes.
thing happens with power chairs too. You're absolutely right. So that's
Maybe there's like a folding bike thing that can happen, like a program where people could actually bring folding bikes on and make them available to people. I don't know, there could be some solutions that
We're gonna try not to get into the conversation at this time.
Okay.
We're gonna, you know, it's just to keep the ideas going. But I got them. Marianne's gonna.
Any other ideas, thoughts?
Yeah, I have no idea if this is for us to address, but my problem with transit has been the demographic. You know, back when we were fighting for green light, it was about the folks that drive their kids to school and then complain they have no time, or they drive their kids to soccer meetings and don't have time. You say, well, why can't you put your kid on the bus? And by the way, then complain that their kids are all overweight because they don't walk anywhere. And you say, well, there's a bus stop. Well, I'm not going to make them walk 2 blocks to the bus stop. I drive them to the gym and have them you know, how to change that piece, especially for folks that can't drive. So it's like my kids can't drive, grandma can't drive anymore. You know, my wife broke her foot. That's how I started getting involved in transit. Here's folks that can't drive. Well, that just means I'm going to have to drive more. So, you know, how to get that notion out that the point of transit is to help those folks. And by the way, I happen to think that once you get enough people seeing that, they'll stop saying that transit is for that other guy. Let's quit paying taxes for it. Because you start saying, well, transit's for my neighbor. I mean, there's a story that's what happened with gay rights, was once everyone figured out that everybody has a gay son or daughter, suddenly instead of it being someone else's problem, once everybody takes transit, then it becomes, you know, normal.
I think we can start to frame that.
I don't know how.
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that becomes an image thing too, because I think
Image.
it's like, yeah, we are transit riders.
We
And
are
all of us,
transit,
We
yeah.
are PSTA
We are
riders
beautiful
here.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But personalizing it, like
Absolutely.
personalizing the usage and the.
And what to do with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other ideas?
You can even talk about like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna change this. I'm on this committee to do whatever it is. Fill in the blank.
That's it.
It's PSTA Mad Libs. Go.
That's a good way of saying it.
Well, I have something. You know, it's funny when you talk again about communication about PSTA, even on the bus, you know, you're always putting in a little sheet of what's going on, and people aren't reading it. They're not looking at it. They're going to work, they're going wherever they're going, and they're not seeing it at all. It could be there for months and nobody would notice it. So-
You know, it's interesting when you were talking about the things on the bus, I heard something on the bus today. They announced something about if you like your driver, report it in. And one of the things we'd asked about here in the committee in the past was we said, can't we have, like, you know, in some municipalities they'll have, you know, today's driver is Joe C. or, you know, Ralph B. or Mary J. You know, you don't even have to have a real name. It can be their, you know, nom de plume for when they're driving. But so that we can call in and compliment or criticize the drivers or something that happened on a route. And that's an internal issue, but I think that, you know, is an important thing as well. And, you know, I heard that on the bus today, and I thought, good that we're hearing it, but how do we do it?
So in that instance, maybe, you know, at some point we can talk about what the marketing plan is and how to, the challenges that we have reaching busy people.
I'm not sure if this is the place to, you know, discuss this issue, but, you know, one of the big things that's going on locally is in Hillsborough with the service changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that they have, our PSTA's finances are better than Hart's. However, you start to look at the budget, and I think that there's going to be the CFO just left, so that It seems like there's gonna be if I'm reading the numbers correctly, that we're gonna be running a deficit next year. And so I'm just wondering, I think probably everybody in here would be affected if service changes were implemented here. And so, and this is internal, and I don't know if this is necessarily initiative, but maybe it could be more of an informational type of, I mean, what would that possibly look like for PSTA if we had to go through those service changes?
We'll be talking about that just as a regular course of business, not only in terms of walking you through the budget cycle, which will start here shortly, but also talking about how we make service changes that we bring to you. I will let you know that yes, if we continue our current operations, we'll be dipping into our reserves. A lot of those is to buy buses. But we definitely can go over that in more detail.
Yeah, because one of the thoughts that when you talk about the budget too is there's always the talk about how do you increase ridership to bring in revenue, and that was one of the thoughts that I had last year. I was thinking, wouldn't that be an interesting initiative if we have thoughts on how to increase ridership, right? You know, or save money, you know, one way or the other. Yes.
One thing that pops in my mind when you talk about the awareness and everything is I'm really lucky that I live near a high frequency line, the Route 4. But I'm also so surprised that so many people in my neighborhood just never ride the bus. You know, so like it's in St. Pete, there seems to be a lot of awareness about things like community and the environment, and businesses talk that game a lot. So it almost seems like there should be opportunities, maybe, like I read about the U-Pass, and how maybe more businesses would buy into that. The places like either Trader Joe's or some of the events like Localtopia or Open Street St. Pete. Maybe some more links to that kind of. The people who are attending those kinds of events are all about community and local, and maybe there's a way to sell tickets to an event that include maybe a bus ticket or something. I don't know.
Well, you're gonna love some of this stuff we're gonna bring to you.
Oh, good.
And the other, while I'm talking, I was just going to say about the transparency and the route and bus stop information. You mentioned that the app, which I haven't tried yet, but I had noticed that the bus stops all advertise the texting service. And when I try to use that, the information seems less complete than what I get on Google Maps. There's some bus stops that aren't covered, or sometimes it says there's no service when there is something scheduled. So it just seemed like either maybe that should have everything Google Maps have, or maybe the app that you mentioned should be advertising a little more.
It's like you were in my office today.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
Great. No, thank you so much.
Is there still something going on with rapid transit?
The bus rapid transit project, we can bring that to you. The Central Avenue bus rapid transit, which would be the catalyst project for regional.
I don't know if it's in the time frame.
It is.
Of this
It's
committee or...
So when Brad goes to Washington in March, we'll be talking about that with our congressional delegation, because that will take federal funding. So we'll put that on the list of things to bring to you for sure.
Oh, okay. I had another internal one that I mentioned to you guys, but that I've been discovering things, and again with conversations with other riders too. Different drivers tell us different stories about whether they want, whether like, oh, I can't touch your money, or I can touch your money, or do this or don't do that. And I think, internally, it would be nice for us to know. One of the things that we were talking about is the whole issue of hailing a bus. When I started riding, I never thought to hail the bus, and I've asked a couple drivers about it, and they said absolutely, because they said that there are people sitting on the benches that aren't going to ride, or if there's more than one route, they want you to know. And I almost think we ought to get some kind of training that's like the air traffic controllers with this, so that we know what to signal the drivers of, no, I don't need you, or yes, I do need you to stop, that type of thing, because they said there are also people that are using our bus stops as their homes, unfortunately. Right. And so good things for us to learn about the official ways, I think.
driver do's and don'ts? Bus driver do's and don'ts, or
Well,
rules of the
driver
road?
interaction do's and don'ts is really more like what, so that I mean, as riders, what do the drivers expect of us, and what, how do we do that right also, so that anyone who's riding can learn, it is best to hail the bus if you can. You don't feel stupid doing it, which is. No, I did, I felt like, oh my God, are they thinking I'm like crazy, I'm waving at them, but, yeah,
When they
I
wave
do-
back and keep on going.
I've had that happen too, but yes. Okay. Others, yes, ma'am.
I ride the number 11 to go to school, and some of the bus stops cannot be seen when the drivers are going down that road, especially at my school, and they go right past us, because we don't know if they're coming or not coming. Is there a way we can make it sometimes visible for us to be seen? Instead of, like, when it's raining, we don't want to be seen in the rain waiting for the bus.
Yeah,
and we don't want to be in the shelter.
We do work on the visibility of the bus stops. Just changed some of the laws on
Are they gonna put more?
lights, but if you have a specific stop that you want us to take a look at, you can email that to Marianne, the stop number, and we'll go out and take pictures, and if we can put a shelter there, we'll put a shelter there.
Because there is a shelter, but it's like in the far back where you can't be seen from the road.
It just needs to be moved up.
Yeah.
And we're putting new solar lights in some of our new shelters. Have you seen them? Yeah.
Oh, really?
They're nice.
So I know you mentioned art at the bus stops, which I don't know that we need art at the bus stops, but nice looking, clean shelters seem to be, at least from the trolley line, kind of sporadic and hard to find.
Well, by the way, that's an interesting thing real quick too, on the whole brief bright zones. I know that's something Elizabeth has talked a lot about, the not smoking in the bus stops. Brief release zones, yeah. Are another thing. Yes.
I just had another thing that had to do with visibility and where the bus stops are located. It sometimes seems that they're so disjointed from the communities. I mean, at some places, like in downtown St. Petersburg, you can easily get off the bus, walk to a shop, whatever, but in some places you're just kind of dumped along the side of a road, going, and I don't know if this is an initiative or not, but a way, as you were saying, to get like local businesses like more involved and to kind of have community more ownership, so it's not just like, hey, I'm being dumped on a sidewalk next to a highway, and now I have to cross, 4-lane traffic to get to the other side. Like, how can we make this a more welcoming environment all the way around, that this is not only meant to be utilitarian, but meant to actually be an experience where people want to ride a bus.
Any other?
For me, it's express and regional transit. I brought that up last year too. Sure. Not people who aren't just going from downtown St. Pete and working at Tyrone like I do, but people who live in downtown St. Pete and work at Countryside and don't want to ride the bus for 3 hours.
Right.
We need express in Pinellas. We don't need express to Tampa. We need express with Pinellas. Because you get people who live in Pinellas Park and want to go to Countryside Mall, but they also don't want to sit on a 34 and a 19 for 2 hours. Or,
For me coming down here?
right, like if you wanted to come to my house, you would be like, you would have had 11 yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to look at, is more internal express, like because I have a New York frame of mind, I can't help it. I just see people coming down 19 and the bus stopping at Countryside Mall, and the next stop isn't until it gets to Pinellas Park. Oh no, there's one before that, Largo. Like hitting only major stations.
Yeah.
Like the 4 train runs express this time of day in Manhattan, and it stops at Grand Central, and the next stop is in the Bronx. So,
So let's, in the context of bringing you the Central Avenue BRT, let's talk about how that fits into our vision plan of a series of rapid bus routes.
Right.
A 19X. Running along with the 19.
Mhm.
So, I mean, and we can talk about what we've identified as what we call our core routes, which is where we want to put increased frequency and span of service first. So, 59, the 4, the 18, 19, 34, 52, those powerhouse routes.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you that we need express in Pinellas, but I would also look for the regional, because I think when you look at Pinellas, just the acreage, people are going to eventually sprawl out. There's no way, even Hillsborough County where I work, eventually people are going to go out towards Lakeland or maybe even towards Sarasota. And so there has to be regional transit eventually to connect those. I think it's a pretty popular topic nowadays to talk about. But you even look at Pinellas and Hillsborough both got new transit apps recently, both different apps.
They are
They're
different
not
apps.
connected in
Yeah.
any way.
One bus away.
And so we talk about regional transit, but in the end, we're really just doing our own thing.
You can get hard routes on transit app.
And you can get Pinellas ones on one.
And they both
We
work
can
on
talk,
maps.
we can talk in detail about transit app versus one bus away.
And so it is, and even hearing how Hart's really not very good financially, so how do you do regional transit when, we're all not financially feasible to do that? So it's interesting.
And you people are on Apple Maps now,
Pardon?
Apple Maps, and it's seamless. It goes Pinellas and Hillsborough.
Yeah, Google
Pinellas are
Maps.
both on Apple Maps.
Yeah.
If you are, now all the meetings that PSTA does are on the web, live streamed, so we're being live streamed right now. This is also being recorded, so you can look at it later. If you ever miss a meeting, you can see what your fellow committee member said. On Friday, we will be hosting the Transportation Management Area Working Group, which is members of 3 county metropolitan planning organizations. They'll be here at 9:30. If you are available and you'd like to attend, you're more than welcome to attend their workshop. They'll be looking at the regional transit feasibility plan that you may have seen in the newspaper. I think it's about a little less than a week ago. I think it might have been the front page. It's a nice big 60-foot articulated PSTA list. But that meeting and that plan will be discussed on Friday. That meeting will also be, I think, we are not doing it, the consultant and the MPOs are doing, we're just providing a space, but they will be recording the meeting as well. So if you can't attend, you can always view that workshop.
Good, that's good to know. And that'll be on the PSTA site that I can find the link on that?
Yeah, well, why don't you make sure that we connect.
Because I always
ask. Yeah, it's definitely on the Pinellas MPO website. If you go to forwardpinellas.org, the agenda is there. But we can work on, let's ask, we can ask Mia, to put a link there.
We are running out of time, and so I think what we need to do at this point is probably any other ideas that people have, like we had talked about, forward them please to Mary Ann, and we will try to gather everything for the next meeting and try to cull them down. One of the things we have typically on our agenda, and it's on here today, is member comments. If you have anything specific that you want to bring to the committee, this would be the point at which you could also mention or question. If anyone has any member comments at this point, then I will be adjourning the meeting, and we will see you all back here on the 20th of February. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you.
Everybody get their bus.
I'm just laughing because last year was Valentine's Day and I remember running out of here, rushing
Oh, it was
to my
Valentine's Day.
place.
That's right.
Gloria, there'll be a group photo, so everyone should try.
Oh,
to
yes,
attend
next week, yeah, next month there will be a group photo, so definitely be here.
And dress nice.
Dress nice.
I'll see you next.
Excellent.
Gloria, I'm gonna transfer.
Oh,
So, 'cause they're going there.
amazing, I can see our